So last week we were talking about different things that that the Bible's consistent with. We covered paleontology, astronomy, meteorology, biology, anthropology, and hydrology. But after class, there was a few people that came up to me and made some comments regarding some of those things. And Randy's not here. I was looking for him. He made a real interesting comment about the white blood cell and the detail of it. And actually, I don't know the name of the chemical, but he said the way that it's created, that it actually will attack a bacteria and it drills a hole into the bacteria and then it dumps in the chemical that kills that bacteria. And for the human body to be able to do that, we're talking about creation or something that evolved, but the intelligence that it would take to have some kind of a white blood cell. And I know we've got a doctor over here. I didn't know if he knows what that is called, but Randy was telling me about that.
So, there's a couple different types of white blood cells. So each different subtype actually has different functions.
Okay. Okay.
It's been a long time since I looked back, but
All right.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah, he was telling. I was amazed by that. So, and then I know John and Ned both made comments. I was going to count on them to see if they wanted to make a comment on what they talked about. Ned.
You were talking about the stars in Psalm 147, verse 4. It kind of alluded to that we really don't know how many, but in Psalm 147, verse 4, it says, He counts the number of stars, He calls them all by name.
Yeah.
So when you think about God, the stars that are there, He knows them all, knows them by name. And the other point, and Tim could probably allude to this, is in verse 17, it says, He casts out hail like morsels. Who can stand before His cold? When you think about what God's created, you think about the weather. Tim was in Alaska, so
Right.
you can't, as cold as it gets,
Yeah.
that's what God's created.
Yeah. Did you want to make a comment about the?
Go ahead.
No, you were talking. I think we were talking about the paleontology part, and I think that you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things, involving scripture that we find, that have come true. Man has discovered things that, that many have determined that, hey, this was not a fact. For instance,
Right.
like the Hittites, is mentioned over 60 times
how the Bible's written is it's a matter of fact. It's not, just the whole explanation. It's like, this is how it is, and, and that's accepting everybody. Nobody thought about it because we didn't have the science or the ability to detect those things. But now we do with all of our technology and improved technology. We see all these things. And again, like I stated last week, there's nothing in science that has ever proven the Bible wrong. Nothing has come out that the Bible has stated, scientifically speaking, that was incorrect.
I think
Yep.
it's interesting too. I mean, you go to any high school science class and get their science book, you'll see 17th, 18th edition, 19th edition.
Yep.
They continually bring out new editions because they have to update the information because what they taught 20 years ago is no longer true.
Right.
They rediscovered things that, obviously have been found out and later with technology and different things. But the Bible, there was no need for the Bible to have, a
Yeah.
17th edition, 18th edition, because some of the facts they got was a little wrong or anything like that. It's amazing when you think about that.
Yeah.
And the Bible, written in ancient times is completely accurate. That is so much proof that it came from God.
Right. And the evidence that the scriptures that we're talking about, most of them were written in the 1400 BC era. So, and then things now we're finding that are in the 1700s, 1800s, that they had proven those things, and they were already talked about and discussed that early on. So 3,300 years, we're talking about.
I don't want to go longer.
No problem. That's what the class is for.
One of the things always interests me in theology majors is when the law of circumcision was put out, it was circumcised on the 8th day.
Mm-hmm.
Now today, in the medical field, they'll give the kids vitamin K for blood clotting, but they knew then that it needed 8 days for that to build up so the blood would clot.
Sure.
Most of that's the neatest thing.
It is, and then again, and I was going to bring that up, but again, that was written also. That was in the 1440 BC, I believe. That law was written, and they didn't even have an idea. I've been talked to people about it, and they said, "Well, that was something that they could have learned on their own. They could have just gone through the process. Well, we circumcised that boy; he didn't make it, so maybe we'll try the third day." I mean, and I said, "No," that doesn't make any sense, And so I said, in fact, when the circumcision was put into law, it said you are going to do it on the 8th day. Yeah. That's today. But maybe don't offend my doctor back there. But yeah, that's the interesting thing, that it was a law, and there was no trial and error. They had no idea what that was. They're probably just as shocked at the rule as anybody. Anybody else? So statements consistent with geology. I kind of got into this a little bit. We read Jeremiah 31:37, where it talked about the crust of the earth and also the shape of the earth being a circle. And I also, if you want to turn over to Job 26. Job 26, 7 through 10. He stretches out the north over empty space. He hangs the earth on nothing. He binds up the water in his thick clouds, yet the clouds are not broken under it. He covers the face of his throne and spreads his cloud over it. He drew a circle horizon on the face of the waters at the boundary of light and darkness. And then in Proverbs 8:27. When your terror comes like a storm and your destruction comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you. I'm in Proverbs 1. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep. So we kind of got into the discussion about what a circle looks like, and it's actually a flat, if you look at it, it's a circle, but if you turn it, it can be a flat plane. So you have people that say, well, the Bible was incorrect about talking about the earth being a circle. And so I was kind of interested in that, because all of the verses, I challenge you, you can look, all of the verses do call the earth a circle. But I did a little more investigation. And so in Isaiah 40:22, now this is in the article I read, so it is he who sits above the circle of the earth. So some have argued that this scripture teaches that the earth to be a flat disk. But in actuality, the better translation, if I can find it now, what did I do with it? There it is. The Hebrew word in question is kug. I think I'm saying that right. That's K-H-U-G, which is also found in Job 22:14, where in many Bible versions it is translated vault. For example, the New American Standard Bible reads, "Clouds are a hiding place for him so that he cannot see, and he walks on the vault of heaven." Clearly, vault carries the sense of something three-dimensional and is given as a primary meaning of kug in the well-known Brown Driver Briggs Hebrew and English lexicon. In modern Hebrew, a sphere is denoted by kug. So it's important to understand that Isaiah 40:22 and then also Job 22:14, that Hebrew translation is actually better translated as sphere instead of a circle. So for the fact that they had written about the earth being in the shape of a sphere without having a telescope or any technology that we have today, I mean, this is back in Job, one of the first book, well, I believe it was the first book written, it had that talked about that. So here we have evidence that the Bible also is correct about the shape of the earth without the ability to find out. And then later on in history, we see that people become, flat earthers. They believe the world was flat. And we had the people that, sailed around the world to prove that the world was a sphere. And the Bible already clearly knew that thousands of years prior to them doing that. So that's just another evidence that we have regarding that. Also, I found this interesting. In the early 1600s, the Pope and the Catholic Church claimed that the earth was round and it was the center of the universe. Now, the reason that they thought this, they based a lot of their philosophy on Plato and Aristotle. And Aristotle studied under Plato, and Aristotle had written that the moon, the sun, all of those revolved around the earth, and that those were actually celestial stars. He said that he assumed that the particles on them were, some heavenly special dust or whatever, but that's what they were created, but that they actually revolved around the earth. Well, not until Galileo came along, and Galileo, with the invention of the telescope and the improvement of that, he actually proved that that's not how it happens. He actually eyewitnessed the solar system that we know today. And within that, and the church prosecuted Galileo, and he actually in 1633 was found guilty of heresy against the Catholic Church because of this belief. Now think about this. So he proved that what the Catholic Church believed was false, but they still convicted him of that because they still had that much ability and control of the government. But in 1633, when he was found guilty, he went ahead and, because he was old, and that sentence also carried the punishment of imprisonment, death, and torture. So he didn't want to go through that, so he recanted his claim that the earth orbits the sun, or that he recanted his claim that the earth orbited the sun. So even with the proof, several more years, the Catholic doctrine taught that the earth was still the center of the universe. Now we know with technology today how the solar system works. We know that that's not true. So the Bible never claimed that the earth was the center of the universe. Nowhere in the Bible does it claim that. And I think that I've maybe even heard that, not in the church, but from people that, they say, well, the church said that the earth, that everything revolved around the earth, and that's not correct. Well, I come to find out it was actually the Catholic doctrine that taught that. So again, we have another example of the Bible being correct in our solar system. Any questions or comments regarding that? Okay, and then letter H in your notes was statements consistent with physics. Turn over to 2 Peter 3:10. Now, there's not a lot about, there's probably more, but this is, I found this one interesting. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with a fervent heat. Both the earth and the works that are in it will be burned up. What, I'll give it away if I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question. What do we have today that would do this?
Nuclear.
Thank you. Nuclear weapon. A nuclear weapon has the capability to do this, and that obviously all the physics that goes into producing a nuclear weapon. But here obviously Peter's talking about the power of God, and we should take note how much power that God has. And we've already painstakingly proven the validity of the scriptures, and that we know that God exists and God created the earth and how much power he has, and then the ability for him to destroy. He's comparing it to a nuclear bomb. So that's something to take note at. But here we have something that's a statement regarding type of physics, and we have that also where it be consistent in the scriptures regarding that. So I went ahead and looked up some additional science consistencies in the Bible that I wanted to go over that wasn't really in the book. And we talked about it here just a minute ago with Harold. So if you would turn over to Genesis 17:10. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised. And you shall be circumcised in the flesh on your foreskins, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations, he who is born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. So we have this evidence here again that Harold explained very well on the 8th day, and that the vitamin K levels are at their highest, which is responsible for blood clotting and the coagulation in the blood. And so now today, we have all that ability. They can circumcise immediately because they can give the infant the medicine, the vitamin K that they need to help the blood coagulate.
Hey, Tony, if you think about that too, man would not come up with this.
No.
If man was writing this book, man, and I'm kind of agreeing with Harold, this is amazing fact about Scripture.
Right.
Man would not come up with this idea of circumcision,
Right.
let alone to a baby.
And let alone trial and error, like I talked about, like people.
Let alone know when to do it.
Mhm.
What man would come up with this idea and say, hey, this is a good idea. Let's write about this and put it in the Bible.
Why don't you guys come up with this idea?
Yeah.
But I mean, right there, that is amazing, and the fact that and there's been studies done recently, like in the 1950s, they just came out and realized that circumcision, there's a lot of health benefits.
Oh, yeah.
Around that.
Sure.
As far as keeping from diseases and UTIs and different
Sure.
things like that. There's a lot of benefits to that. But how in the world would man come up with this idea back in ancient times?
Right. And they wouldn't have got, that'd be pretty lucky if you selected the correct day of the birth. Well, maybe the 8th day. That sounds about right. That's not going to happen. So, yeah, those that are live streaming, sorry, John was talking about that man would not have come up with the idea of the circumcision, especially noting what day it would be performed on. That just wouldn't happen. Turn over to Numbers 19. So we have to go down through there. It's talking about the purification of water with the soap, and I was wanting to reiterate the idea of the soap. This discusses the use of soap with the same ingredients that we find in lye soap today, and it's used for disinfecting and cleansing. And so here we have back in Numbers, again, and Numbers is 1445 to 1405 BC. So they had the, the ingredients to make the soap, and it was given to them. So they have that. Why would, again, that's not trial and error. That's something that they were told to do, and they followed it. Turn over to Leviticus 11. And that's the other thing I thought was interesting in these studies, is that all these are so long ago. This isn't, early on or close to the turn, of time. It was thousands of years ago when these things were happening.
If you look at history, Tony, this stuff was, quote, so right that we regressed from it. Clear up until the 18th century, when you did take baths, that's why you had June weddings. Women only washed twice a year, in June and Christmas. That was it, because it was considered to cause brain damage.
Really?
That's why that's why the June weddings and the Christmas weddings, that was only 2 times a year a woman bathed with her hair.
Is that why people
It was
were...
considered brain damage.
Okay.
And up with her head underwater. So we regressed that far back to come back to where we found out that it was actually okay. They were doing this 1,000 years before that. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
where all that actually is from.
So Rich was pointing out that we have, through history, we had regressed from some of these ideas of the purification and cleanliness that they had learned. So Leviticus 32, 34. Now we had, I forget the name of the guy, it wasn't Kyle Butt, John, but somebody from Apologetics Press was here, and he mentioned this, and I kind of looked this up for this, and I can't think of his name, but so, and starting in verse 32. Anything on which any of them falls when they are dead shall be unclean, whether it is any item of wood or clothing or skin or sack, whatever item it is in which any work is done, it must be put in water, and it shall be unclean until evening, then it shall be clean. Any earthen vessel into which any of them falls you shall break, and whatever is in it shall be unclean. In such a vessel any edible food upon which water falls becomes unclean, and any drink that might be drunk from it becomes unclean. So here we have an example of, I would call it like a cutting board or any kind of a wood utensil, and it's very interesting. Today we have everybody saying, oh, we got to have a plastic cutting board and those type of things, thinking that that's more sanitary than hardwood. And so I looked up the science behind it, and it talks about this in the scriptures where it's talking about the pottery. If they cook on the pottery or anything unclean touches it, you break it, throw it away. Anything that touched that's unclean, considered unclean. The wood and those type of things you could use again. You washed with water and they were good. And why is that? So hardwoods are fine-grained and capillary action of those grains pull down fluid, trapping the bacteria, which are killed off as the board dries after cleaning. This came from Ben Chapman, food safety researcher at North Carolina State. So here we have something back in Leviticus, 1445 to 1405 BC, telling us that how to use utensils. And again, this isn't something that, to me personally, if someone said, if I didn't know this, if they said it's a plastic cutting board more sanitary than a wood cutting board, I'd say yeah, because I would think that the wood cutting board would absorb all that stuff and have it. Well, that's not true. The hardwoods actually absorb the bacteria. The bacteria gets drawn in there. When the wood dries, the bacteria is killed. So that's another science fact that we have. Turn over to Deuteronomy 23:12. Also, you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out. So this is talking about sanitation. And we have many societies, like Rich was saying, since then. How many societies have had dysentery, different types of infections and diseases because of poor sewage? And if they'd went back 3,300 years, because the sanitation started improving around the 1800s, And if they'd went back 33 years prior to that, they would have realized that, oh, there must be something wrong with this. We need to put this in an area that's not going to be touch humans that will contaminate us. So here we have something in Deuteronomy that tells us how to take care of our sewage and waste products. So anyway, that's another example, a scientific example that we have. Any comments? Yeah. Right. Well, they used to run into the streets, and I know Tim knows, and there were certain parts of Costa Rica, years ago that the raw sewage would run right into the streets, into the gutter, and then out, or right into the river, and then then the person right down the river is using the river. Yeah.
Where I grew up, it used to be all the crematories involved places, cemeteries that dumped all their fluids and stuff into the creek.
Ooh.
And that was even up to the 70s.
Really?
All fluids was all dumped into the Coleman Creek. That was okay, it was legal.
Leviticus 13, 45 to 46. Now the leper on whom the sore is, his clothes shall be torn and his head bare, and he shall cover his mustache and cry, unclean, unclean. He shall be unclean all the days he has the sore. He shall be unclean. He is unclean, and he shall dwell alone. His dwelling shall be outside the camp. So here we have an example of quarantine. Again, all the way back in Leviticus. And this, I looked up the history a little bit regarding quarantine, and I found that they actually, it's one of the few times, but they actually referred back to the Bible, the history of the Bible that practiced quarantine, and that the Bible is one of the first examples or societies that practiced quarantining someone that had some kind of a infectious disease. So we have that, and again, I think that that inspiration that the Bible shows us as far as these practices goes a long way. Also, regarding quarantine and bacteria and those things, I also looked up and I'm sure people in here are familiar with this story. In 1846, a Hungarian doctor, Ignaz Semmelweis, I hope I said that right, discovered that women were dying at staggering rates at a birthing hospital. And so he went in and was wondering why so many women were dying giving birth. And he also noticed that the midwives that they had that were delivering the babies, those women weren't dying near as often as they were. Well, he went in and looked, and he found that the doctors were actually working on cadavers, and carrying those without washing their hands, and then they'd go work on the women that were giving birth. The women would get a bacteria from the dead bodies, and then those women would die. And so he found this, and he acknowledged that, and so he commanded or ordered that all the doctors go wash with chlorine after they touch the cadavers, do a chlorine wash, and then they would go give birth, and the death rate dropped to less than 1% after he instilled that practice. Some of the diseases that they would carry from them was Streptococcus pyogenes. I want the doctor to correct me on my pronunciations because I can't say it. But anyway, so they were carrying these diseases from the dead bodies to the women when they were giving birth, and until they instilled that practice of cleaning, those women would die. But once they did that, the death rate fell below 1%. And then later, and actually that was in 1846, and actually people started to get away from that, and they didn't believe him regarding the bacteria until Louis Pasteur came along in 1895. And I know people were familiar with him. He developed pasteurization, and he came up with all of these, but he was also known for finding the bacteria and its capability to spread. So he proved that, and he came with vaccines for rabies and anthrax. So he actually developed that based on his knowledge of the bacteria. He realized that the bacteria grew and that he had to create a vaccine that would stop that bacteria from growing. Bless you. Any comments on that? Bless you again. So in summary, let's turn over to Proverbs 2, 1 through 6. Before I read that, does anybody have any little nuggets that they've heard of that they knew that are in the Bible that I maybe didn't cover? Because I'm always interested in that. Okay, Proverbs 2, 1 to 6. My son, if you receive my words and treasure my commands within you, so that you incline your ear to wisdom and apply to your heart understanding, yes, if you cry out for discernment and lift up your voice for understanding, if you seek her as silver and search for her as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. So in the last few weeks, we've noted that the Bible obviously is not a science book or a history book. It is written for all mankind to learn and to know God, and it was given to us to see evidence of God through his creation. And then, most importantly, it gives us the ability to know and obtain salvation that we can be with him. So the whole purpose of the Bible is to give us enough information and enough evidence that we can see his creation and we know that he exists based on the knowledge that we have from the scriptures. And then it allows us the opportunity to understand how we can obtain salvation. So that's something that, as we're going through this, that we need to think about. Any comments on that? That's kind of the end of a section, and I'm getting ready to start another section. I like the couple of these titles. So this next lesson is going to start. Yeah. So, I'm sorry, Tim.
Along with the leprosy is something that we're dealing with now, are these masks.
Yeah.
And he would have them wear masks. Well, leprosy is spread through the droppings through the nose.
Yeah.
And a sneeze, it's not highly contagious, I'm told, but you
Yeah.
still need to cover it.
Right.
They did.
Yeah.
They didn't know anything about germs.
No.
The spread of germs.
No, they didn't understand
And
that.
he tells them to wear this covering over their face.
Right. And he actually told them how to cover it. He said to put the, yeah. So the next part we're getting into is natural law or divine awe. So let's turn to Genesis. Well, I've got 2 minutes. You got 1 minute. I won't start because there's too much right at the beginning. So we'll you guys get out early, I guess.